Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 4 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football in 2021. Inside of today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 32 ranked wide receivers of the week, as well as discussing why I have them ranked at each and every single spot inside the top 32. But before we get on into things, I'd like to ask, if you are new to my channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me, to please do so at Notorious FNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the description. So without further ado, let's get into things. We begin at number 1 with Davante Adams of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I talk about this basically every single week in the rankings videos, that there are certain players at every single position that are just the upper echelon, that are just so good that it doesn't really matter at all what defense they are playing. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense obviously isn't the best defense in the NFL, but they certainly aren't a bottom tier defense. So this could be a tough matchup realistically for Davante Adams. But then again, he's Davante Adams. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. So I will roll Davante Adams out this week with supreme confidence, and I believe you guys should as well, as my wide receiver number 1. At number 2, we have Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, it is undeniable at this point that Cooper Kupp is one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football. Him and Matthew Stafford are just an amazing combo. Cooper Kupp gets the ball early in the game. He gets the ball in the middle of the game. He gets the ball at the end of the game. He gets the ball basically every fucking time Matthew Stafford throws it. It magically just lands in the hands of Cooper Kupp. This week up against the Arizona Cardinals, this is definitely not a super tough matchup defensively, but the Arizona Cardinals defense is pretty solid. I do believe this will be a back and forth affair, as Vegas has this at one of the highest point totals on the week. I believe Cooper Kupp puts up yet another big game, and at this point, ranking Cooper Kupp outside of the top 5, based upon how he has performed thus far this season, to me is a little bit silly. At number 3, we have Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills going up against the Houston Texans. Now, this year, Stefon Diggs has been a very big disappointment through the first 3 games of the season. Now, am I going to tell you guys that Stefon Diggs is a bust for fantasy football? Of course not, because we are just 3 games in. This will be the 4th game of the season, and Stefon Diggs could certainly turn the page and have an excellent rest of the season. Stefon Diggs hasn't necessarily been a bust, like I said, because he's not wide receiver like 60 right now. He's just not a top 10 wide receiver. He's not a top 20 wide receiver, but I do eventually believe that by the end of the season, we will forget what the start of the season was, as he will finish inside the top 12 here going up against the Houston Texans. This is just a cupcake matchup. The only worry here is that the Buffalo Bills are just beating down relentlessly on the Houston Texans. The Buffalo Bills are favored by 17 points in this game. So Vegas, along with myself, believes that there is a murder going down in Buffalo on Sunday up against the Houston Texans. I think Stefon Diggs will be a very big proponent of this being a very high-scoring game and will put up some big points himself. Next up, at number 4, we have Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. The Eagles defense looked putrid up against the Dallas Cowboys last week. I think Tyreek Hill should have no problem at all having a very big game this week and potentially finishing as the number 1 wide receiver on the game. And all it takes for Tyreek Hill is one long ball for him to go for like a 70-yard reception and a touchdown. That's all it really takes. He's one of those wide receivers in fantasy football that can truly win you your week by himself. He is a game-breaking wide receiver because he could have 2 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that should not surprise you at all. Tyreek Hill could be in for a humongous game this week up against the Eagles. At number 5, we have Wiki DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers going up against the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry's World. Now, the Dallas Cowboys defense absolutely suffocated that Philadelphia Eagles offense last week. Is the Dallas Cowboys defense elite, or is the Eagles offense just that bad? That's probably what we'll figure out on Sunday. The Carolina Panthers are on a roll as they are 3-0. Mono man Sam Darnold looks like a completely new quarterback from going from the Jets to the Panthers. It's as if that Adam Gase really does put a curse on these players, and once they escape his wrath, like Ryan Tannehill, then they're just great quarterbacks. So here we got DJ Moore with Mono Man Sam up against the Dallas Cowboys. We just have to acknowledge the fact that DJ Moore has been an incredible player thus far this season. DJ Moore has been exactly what we've been looking for the last 2 seasons in DJ Moore, and he finally kind of connected all the puzzle pieces to do it this year. This week up against the Dallas Cowboys, I expect a big game. At number 6, we have another guy with that abbreviated name, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks, going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, Lockett ends up getting banged up last week, and that obviously helps out DK Metcalf, because without Lockett in the game, then Metcalf is going to be force-fed the ball. Now, it does appear that Tyler Lockett is going to play this week in this game up against the 49ers, but with how involved DK Metcalf is in this offense, and with how much of a back and forth game I believe this is going to be, and with how much the Seattle Seahawks are just throwing the ball at this point in the season, I expect DK Metcalf to have an excellent game as my wide receiver 6. At number 7, we have Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Cleveland Browns. Now, Justin Jefferson hasn't been that amazing thus far this season. Now, is it because he's just not the same player he was last year? Probably not, right? But it's because Adam Thielen's getting all these touchdowns, and KJ Osborne, at least in the first 2 weeks of the season, was heavily involved in this Vikings offensive attack. Tyler Conklin scoring a bunch of touchdowns, and as well as the fact that obviously they have Dalvin Cook, who is going to be taking away a decent share of the workload in this offense. But at the end of the day, Justin Jefferson is still Justin Jefferson, and he's going up against the Browns in what should be a very high-scoring back-and-forth affair between these two teams, which will lead to Justin Jefferson having a very solid week. At number 8, we have Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers going up against the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. Keenan Allen, as well as Mike Williams, have just been on a roll week in and week out. Even in the games where Justin Herbert, the pervert, doesn't have an elite fantasy football day, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams still do. Because for receivers, they don't necessarily need their quarterback to have this huge day, fantasy-wise, to play amazing. Because Keenan Allen could get 8 receptions. He could get 90 yards. And Mike Williams could have 110 yards and 7 catches, but neither of them score a touchdown. And Austin Eckler runs in 2 touchdowns. And then Herbert has a bad game realistically for fantasy, but in real life, the team plays well. And the Chargers are a team that look very, very good. They're going up against another very, very good team in the exact same division. I expect Keenan Allen to have a big game. He's been very, very safe thus far this season, and I will continue to roll him out into my lineup. At number 9, we have CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Carolina Panthers. CeeDee Lamb, as well as Amari Cooper, were big disappointments last week up against the Eagles. Despite the Cowboys really laying the hammer into the Philadelphia Eagles offensively, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper were not big parts of that, as Ezekiel Elliott as well as Dalton Schultz were the benefactors of that. This week, though, I expect things to change. CeeDee Lamb is a very safe and very reliable player every single week who has the upside to be maybe the number 1 wide receiver week in and week out on the Dallas Cowboys, so I expect Lamb to have a bounce-back game. At number 10, we have Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Washington Football Team. The Atlanta Falcons offense looks like a complete and utter unmitigated disaster. This team offensively looks terrible. I don't think anyone expected it to be this bad without Julio Jones, but it is. Calvin Ridley has not played up to the expectations that I've set upon him in the offseason, but he also hasn't played terrible, but he hasn't been as reliable as I thought he would be, because he is the clear number 1 target there. This week, they're going up against a Washington Football Team defense, who, while at the beginning of the year, everyone's talking up, hey, the Washington Football Team defense is amazing, the Washington Football Team defense stinks. Calvin Ridley should have no problem having a big game, even if the Atlanta Falcons look like hot garbage. Next up, we move on to wide receivers 11 through 20. If you guys have ended up enjoying thus far, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. So at number 11, we have Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, even coming into this game banged up, if he ends up suiting up, you're going to play him, because Tyler Lockett is a lot like a guy like Tyreek Hill, who just has that game-breaking potential, because all it takes is him to bust off this huge route and Russell Wilson to throw a heat-seeking fucking missile his way, him to score a touchdown, and boom, you have like 15, 16, 17 points just from one play. Because Tyler Lockett is a huge threat in the Seattle Seahawks offense, and unless he is truly banged up to where he's not going to be 100%, or unless he doesn't play, it's hard for me to rank him outside of my top 12. At number 12, we have Mike Williams of the LA Chargers going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Mike Williams has been on a fucking warpath this season. It's a lot like I talked about with DJ Moore. How DJ Moore has been having these solid seasons thus far in his career, but he hasn't really patched together, stitched together that outstanding season. That season, that will be the career year, maybe the career arc change for a guy like DJ Moore, where now he's a very reliable top 12 wide receiver for the next coming years in fantasy football. Maybe that career arc change has happened for Mike Williams, as now he is being a humongous threat in this LA Chargers offense. All offseason long, they were talking about how Mike Williams is in the Michael Thomas role of this offense. And I was like, yeah, you know what? That does sound good, so maybe you should draft him. But I'm not 100% sold in on Mike Williams, because every year we all get all bought into Mike Williams, and inevitably he's a huge swing and a miss. But this year, thus far this season, he has been playing out of his mind, and based upon the fact that he's just on fire, you got to continue to roll him out there, and I put him as a top 12 receiver on the week. At number 13, we have scary F1 Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team going up against the bum-ass Atlanta Falcons defense in Atlanta. It doesn't really matter if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, if it's Taylor Heineke. Terry McLaurin is the guy in Washington. He's the clear number one wide receiver. This week, like I said, going up against a really bad Atlanta Falcons defense, I expect Terry McLaurin to have a very safe and reliable game this week as my wide receiver number 13. At number 14, we have Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the New England Patriots. I expect this game to be a rout. I expect this game to be a destruction of the Patriots defense. On paper, and thus far this season, the Patriots defense has been pretty solid. Definitely better than it was last season, but this is Tom Brady's coming home party. This is Tom Brady going back to Foxborough, and I believe Tom Brady is going to basically do what Eli did on TV and flip them the double birds. He is going to go into New England and absolutely demolish the Patriots. He's going to go in there and say, hey, thank you for nothing, pal. You're out of here. Now, obviously, Tom Brady probably loves Bill Belichick. He loves Robert Kraft. He loves those guys there because they gave him the opportunity to win all those Super Bowls. So I don't think it's necessarily a hate of the Patriots, but something is just telling me that this game is going to be a destruction of the Patriots defense with Chris Godwin as well as Mike Evans putting up very solid performances. At number 14, we have Godwin. At number 15, we have Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, thus far this season, I'm not really too sure who the clear number one guy is in Dallas, because it seems every week it's not necessarily that Lamb is the locked and loaded wide receiver one or that Amari Cooper is, because Dak throws the ball basically to just whoever is open. It's very similar to Tampa Bay Tom Brady, how he doesn't just key in on Chris Godwin. He doesn't just key in on Mike Evans. It's the same thing with Dak in Dallas. I do think this is a solid matchup up against the Panthers, who are a tough defense, so that's why I don't have them ranked super high this week, but I do think both of them have the opportunities to be a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy this week. At number 16, we have D-Hop of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, there are a lot of things that are dictating my rankings of DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is clearly banged up. It appears that maybe he had an injury that is going to limit him for the next couple of games. Now, does limiting him mean that you can't start him? Of course not. But what it does mean is that you should worry a little bit more, and up against a tough LA Rams defense, up against Jalen Ramsey for a lot of the game, I'm just not too sure that I'm uber comfortable starting DeAndre Hopkins this week. That's why he's wide receiver number 16, and you can almost talk yourself into the other wide receivers beneath him into ranking him even lower, but then again, he is DeAndre Hopkins, so you have to believe that even if he is banged up in this game, that he could have a very big performance. At number 17, we have Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, with Deebo Samuel, with Brandon Ayuk getting freed from the doghouse, that doesn't necessarily mean that Deebo Samuel is just going to be shit from here on out, but it does certainly limit the upside, because without Ayuk out there getting too many snaps, Deebo Samuel was just getting force-fed the ball down his throat. Jimmy Guap was feeding the guy the ball. And that's great for fantasy. Now, does that mean, like I said, that Deebo is going to fall off the edge of the earth and be completely shit for fantasy? Definitely not, because this 49ers offense is still very solid. But Deebo is losing out on some potential work to Ayuk, which hurts him. Wide receiver 17 on the week, but this is a great matchup up against a Seattle Seahawks defense. At number 18, we have Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Last week up against the Jets, the Denver Broncos basically just left them in the past. It was like when Tyreek Hill runs past a guy and he hits him with the deuces as he's running back. That's basically what happened with the Broncos to the Jets. So Courtland Sutton doesn't have a huge game. No one needed to have a huge game because they could just run the fucking ball because the Jets offense is so bad. This week they go up against the Baltimore Ravens. So obviously this is a much tougher defensive matchup up against the pass than it would be going up against the Jets. But the difference here is that going up against the Ravens, they're going to have to actually score. They're going to have to actually have a back and forth kind of attack because the Baltimore Ravens aren't just going to suck complete and utter ass in this game, right? The Baltimore Ravens are going to be in this game or potentially likely winning this game. So they're going to have to be throwing the ball, which will involve Courtland Sutton even more. That's why I got him at wide receiver 18 on the week. At number 19, we have Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Cleveland Browns. Adam Thielen has been super safe week in and week out for the Minnesota Vikings, as it seems like, you know what, going into this season, I guess I was wrong because I was thinking, you know what, the touchdowns just have to decrease with Adam Thielen. You can't keep scoring this many touchdowns every single game and elevating your point total. But guess what? The man doesn't give a fuck what I say. All he does is score touchdowns. Death, taxes, Adam Thielen touchdown. Seems like every single game. This week going up against the Cleveland Browns, he's a very safe player every single week. I like Thielen. At number 20, we have a guy with a awful matchup, but somehow, regardless of the matchup, regardless of the fact that this guy's quarterback isn't very good at all, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans going up against the Buffalo Bills this week in Buffalo is still a lock to see so many targets that the volume going his way just mitigates any other issue. They're going to be down by a lot in this game. Like I was talking about with Stefon Diggs, the spread, they are plus 17 right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it got up even higher. Plus 17, that's like a team going up against Alabama in the NCAA. And that's a good team going up against Alabama. This is a college-level spread for an NFL game. So you better believe that they're going to be heaving the pigskin late in the game, and that will lead to even more touches, even more targets going the way of Brandon Cooks. Now we move to wide receivers 21 through 30. At number 21, we have Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the New England Patriots. This game, to me, just screams of a much bigger game out of Chris Godwin. But I could be wrong, and Mike Evans plays much better than Godwin. Those are two guys that are very hard to rank every single week because I could see either of them just having that explosive game. Now, Antonio Brown is also likely to be playing in this game, which is going to lead to confusion because when they're all on the field, typically it's going to be one of those guys is the odd man out. Which one will it be? Every week, my best bet is that Brown will be the odd man out, but I'm not too sure. I'm just not too sure. So I got them all ranked very highly in my rankings because I believe that they are going to bend the New England Patriots defense over and fuck them all night long. At number 22, we have Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Green Bay Packers. Chase Claypool is out. Juju likely out. Deontay Johnson then has to be in for your lineup. If he's playing, this guy has so much upside every single week because he just gets peppered with targets by Big Ben Roethlisberger. It doesn't matter if the Pittsburgh Steelers are seemingly imploding in front of our eyes, even going up against a tough Packers defense. I think Johnson just gets force-fed the ball and has a huge game. At number 23, we have OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr. of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, last week, I doubted Odell Beckham Jr. because to me, I wanted to see him have that solid game before I could completely buy into the fact that he was 100% healthy because I don't understand why he didn't play in week 1 and week 2. Because it seems like he was good to go both games and then doesn't get the nod to go. So in week number 3, I was like, you know what? Let's just see how healthy he is because there's probably clearly a reason as to why he was being held out. Now, without Jarvis Landry there, I guess that was a stupid move because he had a good game. And he should have a good game this week up against a bad Vikings defense. So I like Odell as a top 24 wide receiver. Number 24, we have Jakobi Meyers of the New England Patriots going up against the Bucs. Now, I kind of had an epiphany. It cost me 50 at Tiffany's the other day when I was thinking about this game. Because while I think that the Patriots get steamrolled in this matchup, Jakobi Meyers is still going to be getting targeted because they're going to have to throw. So even if he doesn't have a huge game, right? Even if he doesn't eclipse like 100 yards, he's still going to be being peppered with targets by Mr. Mystic Mac Jones. So even if the matchup sucks, the volume's going to be there. Jakobi Meyers has been relatively solid this season, so I like him at wide receiver 24, and it appears that he is the wide receiver 1 there, not Nelson Agholor. 25, again, we have Antonio Brown. Like I said, I expect this to be a certified shellacking of the defense of the New England Patriots, but again, it's very hard to predict week in and week out which one of these guys is going to have that big game, but with Gronk out, maybe there's room for the big three, for Godwin, Evans, as well as Antonio Brown to have a very big game. At number 26, speaking of Brown, we have his cousin, Hollywood Brown of the Baltimore Ravens, going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, Hollywood Brown had a case of the Butterfingers, had a case of the dropsies last week. This motherfucker has 2 touchdowns. The ball basically just graces his hands. It's like, oh, that's a touchdown, right? You can look away. You're like, oh, in your head, when you see the ball coming and you see how open he is, you see where his hands are, you're like, oh, that's a touchdown. You could get up, you come back, and you're like, wow, how did he drop that? Makes absolutely no sense. Now, I expect that to change. I expect him to play much better this week. I think a lot of people are going to be worried about Hollywood Brown, but based upon his week 1 and week 2, I think he's going to be fine. One bad week is okay. I think Hollywood Brown bounces back this week up against the Broncos. At 27, we have Jalen Waddle away, waddle, till the very next day, bum, bada bum, of the Miami Dolphins going up against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts defense looks like complete shit. The Colts offense looks terrible as well. This is a Jacoby Brissett revenge game. I expect Jalen Waddle to play big. Jalen Waddle was getting targeted left and right by Jacoby Brissett. He's clearly the number 1 wide receiver on this team, at least in terms of targets. Now, the biggest issue with Waddle is that he's not going to be seeing targets that are like 10 yards down the field, 20 yards down the field. He just gets peppered like 5 yards away from Jacoby Brissett. And while that sucks in standard leagues and half PPR and full PPR, the amount of volume coming his way is able to outweigh that. At number 28, we have Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Seattle Seahawks. I still do believe that Debo is going to be the number 1 target on this team, but Ayuk, he's a close second. He's very involved on this team. I think 28 is a very safe ranking of Ayuk because while he broke out of the doghouse last week, it wasn't like he was just getting doused in targets. Maybe that does change this week. I like him this week, though. Decent amount, wide receiver 28 to 29. We have Kenny G-Spot, Kenny Golladay, the New York Football Giants, going up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, with Kenny Golladay, this is basically just a hope and a prayer to the fantasy football lords that Kenny Golladay is just doused in the targets, like is just getting fucking hammered with the football because Shepard's not going to play, Slayton is not going to play, so who else are they going to throw the ball to? You would hope Kenny Golladay. You would hope, and that's why I got him here at 29. It is a huge risk because Golladay has yet to have that big game this season. They backed up the Brinks truck. They give this guy all this fucking money. They give him an unfathomable amount of money, and they don't give him the football. Doesn't make any sense. Joe Judge is talking about how analytics aren't needed. If you use a computer, like then Bill Gates would be winning Super Bowls. What the fuck are you talking about, Joe Judge? You can't even win a game. You are an embarrassment. Give the ball to Kenny Golladay. Hopefully Daniel Jones got the method. I'm like Mike Tyson. Hopefully, Daniel Jones got the message to throw the ball to the best receiver on the field. At number 30, we have Tim Patrick of the Broncos going up against the Ravens. Tim Patrick has been pretty solid this season after Judy got hurt. Definitely got elevated as well by the fact that KJ Hamler got hurt. Tim Patrick is the wide receiver 2 here on Denver. Again, I do believe there's going to be a much more back and forth game. I sound like fucking, it's a meme, Mario, but a back and forth game between the Broncos and the Ravens, much more so than it was with the Jets and the Broncos, which will lead to a more pass-heavy game, which will lead to Tim Patrick having a solid game. Now to wide receivers 31 and 32, we basically got the rejects. They got their own page on here. Robert Woods of the Rams up against Arizona, and Al Robinson of the Bears going up against Detroit. On paper, Robert Woods should have a great game. But that paper doesn't account for the fact that Cooper Kupp is just sucking in all the targets. So Robert Woods, this could be his return. This could be the great triumphant return of Robert Woods having a big game, because this will be a high-scoring matchup, but until we see it, it's hard to play Robert Woods. At 32, we have Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Now, Allen Robinson, to me, is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. The biggest issue here is that Matt Nagy is an idiot. The biggest issue is that the offensive line sucks, and the biggest issue is that they have no idea who the quarterback is. With all of those things going, with all those things said, even up against the Lions, you would think he'd have a good game, but he just hasn't this season. He hasn't put together a big game because this offense is just bad. Hopefully things change. Hopefully Nagy gives the play calling abilities to someone else. Hopefully Matt Nagy is fired or something so that Allen Robinson could actually receive the football. And hopefully the offensive line starts to do something because things are not looking too hot for Allen Robinson as of recently. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. I would appreciate it a ton. I love each and every single one of you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, goodbye.